love doing that. And it's just something interesting that I used to do on another former channel that I ran. Anyways, my name is Steve. They call me the Pirate. This is American Protestant Podcast. So it's brand new, and essentially, if I can learn to talk, those words are hard, you know? But nonetheless, all right. So there's been a recent controversy going on with Canon Press and an ad that they put out for new St. Andrews College. And they particularly used a specific derogatory notion from Johnny Cash giving people the bird in one of their ad videos. So here in a moment, I want to check it out and see what they're referring to or what happened here with this specific ad. It's set Twitter on fire. Twitter, as formerly known as, but is now known as X. Which, if you haven't found me yet, then if I can go ahead and click over real quick, and then you can come find me at American Pirate. That's where I am. Come find me. I discuss all kinds of stuff, whether it's politics, religion, whatever the case might be, whatever the topic trend sometimes maybe. That's where I'd go over to discuss. But nonetheless, I wish this camera was a little bit better, because I promise y'all, it's actually in 4K camera that I'm recording from, but it doesn't really produce that out in OBS. Hopefully it'll fix. So they discussed it last night on Cross Politics with everything that was going on over the controversy, and kind of gave a better context. So there's a couple things I want to do, and I want to review that real quick, and then maybe see what your thoughts are on it. And did they go too far? Was it a little bit too spicy, or was it right up the area of what they was trying to inform, especially within these young students at St. Andrews? So if you don't know what I'm talking about specifically, so this is the notion, and you'll see it in just a moment. You will see this derogatory, as people would see it, giving somebody the bird in the video. And again, it's sparked off a controversy that's been going wild on X. It's been spreading like like wildfire, and in between the kind of the Reformed community has really just, it's caused some separation. And what's interesting is there's just been a lot of this going on lately, especially with the Reformed Church. I don't know if you may have know anything about the ordeal that James White has going on with the Crusades perspective. There's a lot of people on X running around with red profiles and some blue eyes, and it's usually notioned more towards the Reform camp. I guess there are some evangelicals in that are kind of in there, but I guess they're just kind of in the mix. But it seems more of just a Reform-based kind of tension going on right now that Dr. James White's dealing with. So it's not really an area I can deal with much, because I'm not historically versed enough to kind of do it. So it's one of those topics that I kind of got to listen on. But this one is something that I can kind of get into. So if I can hold your attention for a moment, if you haven't seen the ad video, let's go ahead and play it.
Young men to
Whoa, we'll turn it a little bit down.
rebuild Western civilization must be unafraid of pain, blisters, intellectual rigor, and a lifetime of long shifts with swords and shovels, digging ditches, repelling invaders, and reading stacks of books taller than their fathers. Must be impervious to manipulative women of all sorts, giggling virgins, cyber skanks, and even full cauldrons of Karens or hand-wringing clergy, but always seeking to hear and heed the words of Lady Wisdom. Immune to the leadership of hypocrites and LARPing online masculinitods, unaffected by abusive authorities, petty professors, and all brokers of official respectability. Willing to hoist the Jolly Roger and Johnny Cash's favorite finger whenever faced with idolatry. Long-suffering joy and determination required. Must be willing to dwell among the tombs and graves of the long dead, seeking truths that cannot die. Exhaustion guaranteed. Conflict guaranteed. Mortality guaranteed.
Okay, so I don't know about you, but that actually kind of hypes me up. It really does. It kind of gives me kind of a masculinity kind of feel, like ready to do it, ready to conquer, ready to go. So I think it's easily that. I think that's probably what they was going for, especially trying to build up young masculine men in this specific ad for St. Andrews. Now, so there's the pushback again on the Johnny Cash, giving the bird. But I think it's the direct of what they said, willing to do this towards idols. So this is where the pushback is coming back on, and I've seen a few people, especially what I was talking about with earlier, people exploding on X. What is going on? Why are you using this derogatory term? I think a lot of people are, the points going right over their head is that they're pointing this towards idolatry. So I want to kind of look at a couple texts as well to see, hey, is there a biblical basis for this at all? And this is where it would somewhere I would agree with, or take the affirmative on that. I do believe that the Bible uses explicitly what's offensive language, especially when it was the apostles or even Christ that would speak to someone. Was he being offensive towards them, and was there a reasoning for it? So if we actually just let me pop this down real quick and click over to where I want to go, and then I will bloop, knock you over. So the first place that come to my mind, I'm sorry for the harsh lighting. The first place that come to mind was Galatians 5 and something Paul said. So Paul's already been going through this entire letter about talking to the Galatians about abandoning the faith and going back to the practices of the law or the Torah. So they've been pressed on this and about having, not just circumcision, but also need to be following the law. But that's, Paul's arguing, no, you've abandoned this. How did you start the faith or with faith? How did you get the Spirit by faith, but you had to complete it by your works? So this is really extremely agitating to Paul, where he even says that, if anyone else, a couple chapters before, if anyone else brings to you a gospel that we have not preached, may they be an anathema. So I mean, he's completely damning them for what they're saying, and what it's completely a false gospel. It's not true. It's not real. It is false, and it is not a saving gospel. So his emotions are already on high. You can tell while reading the letter that he's not being passive and gentle. This is one of those times that he's actually being very stern with the church. So in something that he says when he's addressing towards the believer and he's talking about the Judaizers, he makes an explicit comment in Galatians 5:12, just in case you can't see it too well on my screen. He said in the ESV version, "I wish those who unsettle you would emasculate themselves." So he's saying go beyond just the circumcision and go ahead and cut it all the way off. And he's talking about the manhood here. So he's literally kind of, that's how irritated he is. So in turn, using that into today's reference of time, of how would you say that? Well, you would say it exactly the same. Just go ahead and cut it off. Go ahead and emasculate yourself completely with what you're. It's the same concept of what he's saying is this message that you have. It's a damnable message, and you are to be considered an anathema, to be damned if you preach a gospel other than the ones that him and the apostles laid out for the foundation. So I think that's pretty starking, language there. But the Bible does things like this. There's conversations sometimes in Scripture that we just simply don't need to be discussing with our kids at the table. There's just terminology sometimes that can be offensive, but that's the point, is they're supposed to be offensive, especially to the unbelieving world. The thing isn't with this, and I want to talk about something a second ago, because Chocolate Knox hit a great point on it when it comes to those that are comfortable or even mature enough in this basis. Now, let me note real quick before that I don't believe that, this could get carried away with some young believers and so on and so forth. I'm sorry, but that's just not the standard. Just because something could be done, especially with a young believer, doesn't mean that the Bible should be suppressed because of that. It just simply does not. So if I want to push this real quick, and then I'm gonna look up a specific verse, and I'll click back over to it. But I want you to hear Chocolate Knox's on Cross Politics response to this, and tell me what you think. So let me go over here. I'm gonna pull it up on my page here, and then we will go ahead and expand it and click it over.
Gone, I think it's probably a good time to bring in kind of where I'm at on this and some things that I see that maybe have touched some of what you were just talking about. When I saw the ad, the first thing it energized me, like everything you said you want to do. I'm like, dang, I'm too old to go to NSA.
You're like thinking like, honey, you're about to call your wife. You're like, do you think I can apply?
But I'm so happy it's there for my children, you know.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking at it, and at the same time, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, now, I can't talk like that, or I can't engage like that, partially because, and I really believe this, I think it takes a form of maturity to be able to do
Yeah.
that, and I know I don't have that yet,
Right.
and yet I don't have a problem with it. But I know that if someone was breaking into my house and they had my kid in their arms with a gun, you're going to hear some interesting language from
Yeah, you
me.
find some words.
I got them.
Yeah.
They are loaded and ready
Absolutely.
to go, and I'm going to use that tool in order to be able to protect my
Scare the
child,
guy.
and protect my
Yeah,
family,
uh-huh.
because I know what time it is.
Yeah.
And so I know that is the moment and when to engage and when to use that.
Yeah.
And I felt like I know when to push back. Right now, I don't know when the moment is to pull out certain language.
Yeah.
I don't know that, and so
In
because
other contexts.
in what?
In other contexts.
In other contexts.
So like you've got a
It's that
context
dire.
where you can imagine yourself using that kind of language.
But
Yeah.
what's
Intense
today?
language.
What's today? Today is the 29th and Thursday. I don't know what happened today that makes me able to use that language.
Right.
Right? I don't have a context to be able to say I don't know. I'm not educated enough or mature enough to know, okay, now's the time to use this language.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's part of my conflict. It's like I think it's fine to use when it's the right time.
Mhm.
Like if somebody came in here right now, like for instance, if Tom Buck, who did a whole video for Gabe, we're gonna play later. If somebody came in Tom Buck's house and Tom Buck started using some language in order to deal with them to get him out the house because he's in a vulnerable position and it helps him, and that's a tool. I'm not mad at Tom for doing that, especially if it's a success rate, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't think he did anything wrong in that moment.
Mhm.
If he's just talking like that because he walks in the door,
Yeah.
you're like, yo, bro.
Yeah.
But it's part of the problem that we don't have an idea of what time it is. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
Right. No, I
I think that's explicitly, pretty clear on what Knox said there, is that this is a maturity based thing and an understanding, and it's the meat and potatoes scenario of those that just kind of more comfortable with something like this. And I'm not saying I agree with Knox on this one. I'm not saying just be profoundly, provocative in your speech, just coming out and just talking like that. It's just kind of like, bro, that's not what we want to do. It's not. But I understand the context when it comes to pointing to, especially an idol, a pagan world kind of sense, and using that stark contrast, kind of like Jeff Durbin did in one of his lectures not too long ago that sparked a huge controversy. It was ridiculous, and even the Harris campaign even used a little bit of that stuff when it comes to his discussions about sacrificing. I'll leave it being this is on YouTube. You just use your imagination to that one. But if I could grasp at you real quick, a spot in Ezekiel. I'm not going to get into the whole thing there because I'm going to wrap this up. But I want you to go, if you can, to Ezekiel 23, verse 20. And what it says is, and lusted, is in reference to a prostitute, reference to Israel, and lusted after her lovers, whose sexual members were like those of donkeys, and whose emissions were like those of stallions. So what this text is saying is that she's being a prostitute, and not only is she being a prostitute, she's being a prostitute looking for men with the biggest genitalia. That's what the text says. So you will pick up a kind of an offensive kind of thing to that, but may the word of God be true, and our emotions and confusion as sinful natured people, let that be set aside and let God speak to what it is. But sometimes God uses those stark contrast, offensive words like whore, prostitute as offensive towards them because that's its intended job is to do so, to give that Adam. That's the exact point for this. So whatever you draw away from this scenario, if you haven't seen the entire video to this in this podcast, I just gave you this clipping, but if you haven't seen it, I'm going to put it in the description below. Go check it out. Let them give a defense of what they're talking about. If you're not willing to listen to it, and maybe that's on you, bro, or sis, whoever it might be. But listen and try to understand why they're using that specific reasoning when it was referring to idols, not Christian brothers and sisters, idols. So I'll end with that. If you got anything from this video or you want to have more discussions about anything, be sure to give me a like, drop a subscribe. I'd love to have you. I'm gonna be bringing a lot more of these on, and hopefully some podcasts here soon with some brothers, and kind of go from there. Appreciate y'all.